Let's continue with our story. Chapter 18. When we got to Gloria Dump's, I told her I had 2 surprises for her and asked her which one did she want first, the small one or the big one. The small one, said Gloria. I handed her the litmus lozenge and she moved it around in her hands, feeling it. Candy? She said. Yes, ma'am, I told her. It's called a litmus lozenge. Oh, Lord, yes, I remember these candies. My daddy used to eat them. She unwrapped the litmus lozenge and put it in her mouth and nodded her head. Do you like it? I asked her. Mm-hmm. She nodded her head slowly. It tastes sweet, but it also tastes like people leaving. You mean sad? I asked. Does it taste like sorrow to you? That's right, she said. It tastes sorrowful but sweet. Now, what's surprise number 2? A book, I said. A book? Uh-huh. I said, I'm going to read it out loud to you. It's called Gone with the Wind. Miss Franny says it's a great book. It's about the Civil War. Do you know all about the Civil War? I have heard it mentioned a time or 2, said Gloria, nodding her head and sucking on her litmus lozenge. It's going to take us a long time to read this book, I told her. There are 1,037 pages. Whoo-wee, said Gloria. She leaned back in her chair and crossed her hands on her stomach. We best get started then. And so I read the first chapter of Gone with the Wind out loud to Gloria Dump. I read it loud enough to keep her ghosts away, and Gloria listened to it good. And when I was done, she said it was the best surprise she had ever had, and she couldn't wait to hear chapter 2. That night, I gave the preacher his litmus lozenge right before he kissed me good night. What's this? He said. It's some candy that Miss Franny's great-grandfather invented. It's called a litmus lozenge. The preacher unwrapped it and put it in his mouth, and after a minute he started rubbing his nose and nodding his head. Do you like it? I asked him. It has a peculiar flavor. Root beer? I said. Something else. Strawberry? That too, but there's still something else. It's odd. I could see the preacher getting further and further away. He was hunching up his shoulders and lowering his chin and getting ready to pull his head inside his shell. It almost tastes a little melancholy, he said. Melancholy? What's that? Sad, said the preacher. He rubbed his nose some more. It makes me think of your mother. Winn Dixie sniffed at the candy wrapper in the preacher's hand. It tastes sad, he said, and sighed. It must be a bad batch. No, I told him. I sat up in bed. That's the way it's supposed to taste. Litmus came back from the war and his whole family was dead. His daddy died fighting and his mama and his sister died from a disease and the Yankees burned his house down and Litmus was sad, very sad. And what he wanted more than anything in the whole world was something sweet. So he built a fat candy factory and made litmus lozenges, and he put all the sad he was feeling into the candy. My goodness, said the preacher. Winn Dixie snuffed the candy wrapper out of the preacher's hand and started chewing on it. Give me that, I said to Winn Dixie, but he wouldn't give it up. I had to reach inside his mouth and pull it out. You can't eat candy wrappers, I told him. The preacher cleared his throat. I thought he was going to say something important, maybe tell me another thing that he remembered about my mama, but what he said was, Opal, I had a talk with Mrs. Dewberry the other day. She said that Stevie says that you called him a bald-headed baby. It's true. I said I did. But he calls Gloria Dump a witch all the time, and he calls Otis retarded, and once he even said that his mama said I shouldn't spend all my time with old ladies. That's what he said. I think you should apologize, said the preacher. Me? I said. Yes, he said you. You tell Stevie you're sorry if you said anything that hurt his feelings. I'm sure he just wants to be your friend. I don't think so, I told him. I don't think he wants to be my friend. Some people have a strange way of going about making friends, he said. You apologize. Yes, sir, I said. Then I remembered Carson. Daddy, do you know anything about Amanda Wilkinson? What kind of thing? Do you know something about her and somebody named Carson? Carson was her brother. He drowned last year. He's dead? Yes, said the preacher. His family is still suffering a great deal. How old was he? 5, said the preacher. He was only 5 years old. Daddy, I said, how could you not tell me about something like that? Other people's tragedies should not be the subject of idle conversation. There was no reason for me to tell you." "It's just that I needed to know," I said, "because it helps explain Amanda. No wonder she's so pinch-faced." "What's that?" said the preacher. "Nothing," I said. "Good night, India Opal," the preacher said. He leaned over and kissed me, and I smelled the root beer and the strawberry and the sadness all mixed together on his breath. He patted Winn-Dixie on the head and got up and turned off the light and closed the door. I didn't go to sleep right away. I lay there and thought how life was like a litmus lozenge, how the sweet and the sad were all mixed up together, and how hard it was to separate them. It was confusing. "Daddy!" I shouted. After a minute, he opened the door and raised his eyebrows at me. "What was that word you said, the word that meant sad?" "Melancholy," he said. "Melancholy," I repeated. I liked the way it sounded, like there was music hidden somewhere inside it. "Good night now," the preacher said. "Good night," I told him back. I got up out of bed and unwrapped a litmus lozenge and sucked on it hard and thought about my mamma leaving me. That was a melancholy feeling. And then I thought about Amanda and Carson, and that made me feel melancholy too. Poor Amanda and poor Carson. He was the same age as Sweetie Pie, but he would never get to have his 6th birthday party. Chapter 19. In the morning, me and Winn-Dixie went down to sweep the pet store, and I took a litmus lozenge for Otis. "Is it Halloween?" Otis asked when I handed him the candy. "No," I said. "Why?" "Well, you're giving me candy." "It's just a gift," I told him, "for today." "Oh," said Otis. He unwrapped the litmus lozenge and put it in his mouth, and after a minute tears started rolling down his face. "Thank you," he said. "Do you like it?" I asked him. He nodded his head. "It tastes good, but it also tastes a little bit like being in jail." "Gertrude!" Gertrude squawked. She picked up the litmus lozenge wrapper in her beak and then dropped it and looked around. "Gertrude!" she screamed again. "You can't have any," I told her. "It's not for birds." Then real quick, before I lost my nerve, I said, "Otis, what were you in jail for? Are you a murderer?" "No, ma'am," he said. "Are you a burglar?" "No, ma'am," Otis said again. He sucked on his candy and stared down at his pointy-toed boots. "You don't have to tell me," I said. "I was just wondering." "I ain't a dangerous man," Otis said, "if that's what you're thinking. I'm lonely, but I ain't dangerous." "Okay," I said, and I went into the back room to get my broom. When I came back out, Otis was standing where I left him, still staring down at his feet. "It was on account of the music," he said. "What was?" I asked. "Why I went to jail? It was on account of the music." "What happened?" "I wouldn't stop playing my guitar. Used to be I played it on the street, and sometimes people would give me money. I didn't do it for the money. I did it because the music is better if someone is listening to it. Anyway, the police came and they told me to stop it. They said how I was breaking the law, and the whole time they were talking to me I went right on playing my music, and that made them mad. They tried to put handcuffs on me." He sighed. "I didn't like that. I wouldn't have been able to play my guitar with them things on." "And then what happened?" I asked him. "I hit them," he whispered. "You hit the police?" "Uh-huh, one of them. I knocked him out. Then I went to jail, and they locked me up, and they wouldn't let me have my guitar. And when they finally let me out, they made me promise I wouldn't never play my guitar on the street again." He looked up at me real quick and then back down at his boots. "And I don't. I only play it in here for the animals. Gertrude, the human Gertrude, she owns this shop, and she gave me this job when she read about me in the paper, and she said it's all right for me to play music for the animals." "You play your music for me and Winn-Dixie and Sweetie Pie," I said. "Yeah," he agreed, "but you ain't on the street." "Thank you for telling me about it, Otis," I said. "It's all right," he said. "I don't mind." Sweetie Pie came in, and I gave her a litmus lozenge, and she spit it right out. She said that it tasted bad. She said that it tasted like not having a dog. I swept the floor real slow that day. I wanted to keep Otis company. I didn't want him to be lonely. Sometimes it seemed like everybody in the world was lonely. I thought about my mamma. Thinking about her was the same as the hole you keep on feeling with your tongue after you lose a tooth. Time after time, my mind kept going to that empty spot, the spot where I felt like she should be. So, throughout this book, Each character is going to teach Opal a little lesson about life. And what you're going to do is you're going to have a form to fill out in which you are going to match life lessons with which character is teaching that lesson to Opal.